Welcome back to Vivid Noise, and today we're looking at 1998's Forsaken, or more specifically, Forsaken 64. I'm going to be using the N64 version of the game for this video for a couple reasons. First of which, obviously being the presentation. Now, you probably already know by now that I am a sucker for this sort of low resolution, really low fidelity kind of visual presentation that actually lends itself really well to the atmosphere of the game. Forsaken is supposed to be this really dingy, sort of dilapidated, the future is forsaken kind of game. So the N64 aesthetic actually makes a lot of sense for this kind of game. It doesn't really look like it's trying to do something that it can't. Although in all fairness, this actually is a pretty faithful port when you compare it to the PC version. Not to mention that when you use the N-Rage input plugin for Project 64, you can get damn near PC-like mouse movement on this thing. It's really good. I feel like there's definitely some room here for me to draw parallels between this and my Crash Bandicoot video, where I talk about how sometimes a more lo-fi presentation to a game can enhance the impact of what's going on screen. Now, to be perfectly honest, there's not that much of a gap here between the N64 and PC version of the game. If anything, the PS1 version is the outlier. Although personally, because of that game's controls, I would never even try and play it. I mean, there's no reason as well, considering that the levels are identical. Yes, the Night Dive remaster features the N64 levels as well, but there's just something about them being in this particular order that I prefer as an overall experience. Not to mention that I find the level design itself for these exclusive levels to be a lot more enjoyable, not necessarily because it's more linear or less linear. There's just something about the way that the corridors are laid out, the textures that are used, the enemy placement. It's just more fun for me. I don't know. There's also the music, which even though right now what you're listening to is the CD quality audio soundtrack that I've re-implemented into this video, the developers actually did a very good job transitioning the CD quality audio music into that sort of MIDI style that the N64 uses to save space. It also helps that most of the music in this game is electronic and drum and bass, which lends itself very well to programming. In fact, with the amount of samples that are typically used in this variety of drum and bass music, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a single real instrument actually played in a studio for any of these songs in their CD quality variants. So overall, I guess I just prefer the way the N64 version presents itself. Simple as that. Now, the main point I want to talk about with this video relates to what you might have noticed in the top left corner. My shield has not dropped once throughout this entire recording, and that's not because I'm very good at this game. You can clearly tell I've taken quite a few hits that should have, done damage. It's because I'm using a cheat. And I will be the first to admit that this cheat is what's allowed me to even enjoy this game to begin with. Personally, I feel no real shame in doing this. I mean, for one, it's just for my own sake. It's not like I'm playing multiplayer and I'm cheating other people. No, I'm just doing this for fun. But this also relates to much more than just this single game right here. I find that using things such as God mode cheats can often allow you to really experience a game in a way that sort of takes that ball and chain off of the obligatory game mechanics. Now, you might think that's being disrespectful to the original game design, and I can totally understand that, but the truth is, I don't love Forsaken because of the gameplay. It's fine. I've never been the biggest fan of Descent or other such 6 Degree of Freedom shooters, but I really enjoy this game just because of the atmosphere, the sound effects, the music, the texture work. Just the overall vibe that the game creates is too strong for me to miss out on it just because the game's hard. And while I totally understand the argument that I should just get good, I don't feel like the mechanics themselves are strong enough for me to really warrant spending that time to get good. I'd much rather spend that time getting better at games that I actually do find to be very, very strong mechanically, like, for example, Super Meat Boy, which is another very difficult game, but I totally have no problem with trying to get as good at it as I possibly can, helping myself a little bit here and there with emulation slowdown, but other than that, I try to play it as legit as possible because that is an extremely engaging experience on its own, difficulty aside. Whereas with Forsaken, really the only thing that I enjoy mastering in this game is actually just the core movement, like whipping around the levels as fast as possible, not necessarily the combat. Although, to be fair, developing a mastery of the movement would probably help a little bit more with avoiding some of the enemy fire, but a lot of the enemies are hit scan, so there kind of is no avoiding that. Then there's also the matter of just playing on a lower difficulty. Now, with this particular version of the game, in fact, with Forsaken in general, it doesn't really apply. The N64 version uses a sort of seamless difficulty selection where the faster you beat the first level, the harder the next levels will be. But right now, I'm technically on the easiest route, and it's still really hard about the cheats. And as for the PC and PS1 version, honestly, as G-Man Lives once said, easy is actually normal, normal is hard, and you go from there, right? But the primary reason why I would much rather play an FPS on a high difficulty while also cheating it, negating the difficulty, is a matter of the game's energy. When a game is being played at a higher difficulty, particularly a combat-based game like an FPS, there's more enemies, the enemies move faster, they take more hits to kill. It creates a more visceral, more action-packed experience that would simply be impossible to get on a lower difficulty where the enemies are essentially neuter. As someone who values that sense of energy and vibrance in a game, I would much rather have the game project that energy back at me while it not really being a threat than to just not have it be there to begin with. The ability to also negate difficulty at will also creates a sort of level of customization to the experience. Like, say for example, you personally believe that there's only a select few challenges within a game which are fairly designed and the rest are just impossible. Well, what you can do is you can simply use God mode to get past the ones you really don't want to do and only devote yourself to those challenges which you feel deserve that time to master. I remember that I specifically did that while playing through both Unreal and Quake 2's Call of the Machine expansion for the first time. I've since gone back and actually played those games properly on the higher difficulties, but playing through them initially on a high difficulty while also not being hampered by it allowed me to sort of experience the games at their best, at their most vibrant, at their most powerful, without being stuck on one level for like 5 hours. There are undoubtedly cons to what I'm doing here with the whole, cheating to have infinite health. Like, for example, it completely ruins any chance of you taking the enemies in a game seriously, since you know that they can't really do any real damage to you. So obviously that can have an adverse effect on the game's atmosphere. But on the other hand, it can also bring back the sort of childlike, this toy-like wonder to a game, especially if a game has a brighter color palette, like with Serious Sam. I love playing Serious Sam on serious or mental difficulty and then just, occasionally cheating, because not only do I get the game at its most explosive, with the most enemies and stuff, but it allows me to sort of get immersed into this very colorful world that Serious Sam takes place in. So it kind of improves the immersion as opposed to dying over and over again and just feeling like, ugh, okay, this is a difficult video game. So I guess on the whole, I just really like analyzing the relationship between a game's tone, the challenge that it presents to the player, and how they, in turn, respond to said challenge, whether it be through perseverance, frustration, or just completely bypassing it. So basically this whole video is just me proclaiming that I have massive skill issues, but you know what? I still like playing these games, so I don't really care. Thank you so much once again for watching another episode of Vivid Noise, and I'll see you guys at the next one.